Addicts, welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we are looking at the must draft my guys at the wide receiver position, breaking down our favorite wide receivers this year, giving you guys a quick reason why we are targeting them over some other players that they're going around. And again, this is one of my favorite series. I love doing these and really also like just going back and looking at how we've done in the past. So we'll start our video by doing that, looking at the my guys from the past couple years, seeing how we did. So we had Keenan Allen, Julian Edelman, Tyler Lockett, and Emmanuel Sanders as our my guys last year. Keenan Allen, wide receiver, 11 in ADP, finished 8th in points per game. So good hit on that one. Julian Edelman finishing 10th in points per game, 7th overall, going as a wide receiver 14, going a couple rounds later than he should have gone. Another hit there. Tyler Lockett was an interesting one. We have him as a hit. He finished with 14.7 points per game, which is below his ADP, but 13th overall after he suffered a pretty brutal leg injury about halfway through the season. His production went way down. Prior to that, he was actually the wide receiver 2 or 3, depending on your scoring, and was looking to be an absolute smash. So that's kind of a hit, kind of a push based on his injury. And then Emmanuel Sanders, I mean, he hit basically where he was being drafted, finished 30th overall, being drafted at 33, but didn't really give you the upside that we were hoping to see from him. Had a couple good weeks, but for the most part, you weren't really happy starting him, so not really going to call that a hit or a miss. So pretty decent year last year. Then we jump over to 2018. We had Devontae Adams, who was the number 1 receiver in points per game. Massive hit there. Juju Smith-Schuster as well. So got our first 2 guys really well. Juju finished number 9 in points per game, even though he was going at ADP wide receiver 18. And then we had a massive miss with Chris Hogan. Our process led us to believe that Chris Hogan was going to see a little bit more volume than Julian Edelman had seen. And that was the year Julian Edelman was suspended for a while, but that ended up not panning out very well at all. So Chris Hogan came in and completely busted. So that was a complete miss on our part. And then Mike Williams, kind of a push as well. Similar situation, finished 42nd in points per game, being drafted as 41st receiver. 32nd overall, wasn't bad, but didn't really do much for you. So wasn't necessarily a bust, but it didn't really help. So we call that a push. So last year, a little bit better than 2018, but we're going to hopefully hit on the Godwin pick. That was one thing I will throw in as a miss there. We should have nailed down Chris Godwin. That was the no-brainer pick, and it got a little cute and avoided it. And I should have targeted Chris Godwin a little bit heavier last year. So I think we got it right this year, though. So looking at 2020, the guys we are picking for wide receiver, first, none other than Mr. DJ Moore, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, coming in and has a quarterback replacement. Last year played the majority of the season with Kyle Allen, who is not very good. Shouldn't have to go too deep into that. But Teddy Bridgewater is actually an improvement in pretty much every metric. Even if Teddy Bridgewater isn't considered like a top-tier quarterback by any means, DJ Moore was a top 10 receiver through 14 weeks last year, or 14 games. Suffered that concussion during, I believe, the first or second drive of the game in week 16, and then didn't play in week 17. So pretty much a 14-game stretch for DJ Moore. At that point, he was a top 10 receiver. Other than that concussion, he hasn't had much of an injury history. He was number 8 in yards after the catch, number 8 in receiving yards in 14 games. So really finishing as a low-end wide receiver 1 through the time that he was actually on the field with absolutely abysmal quarterback play. So bring in Teddy Bridgewater, who has better deep downfield accuracy, better play action completion percentage, better red zone completion percentage. I mean, that was really the big thing for DJ Moore that kept him from being an elite wide receiver 1 last year, was the fact that he only had a couple touchdowns on the season. So if he's able to get closer to the 8 or 9 range and still come in with about 90 receptions and 1,200 yards, he's going to be an absolute stud this year, and you're getting him still at a discount. I have seen him jump to the second round in some leagues, but it seems like the high stakes leagues are a bit more on DJ Moore than we're seeing him go in some of the your traditional like local leagues. And in best ball as well, you see a little bit more of DJ Moore creeping up into the second round. But for the most part, you should be able to find him in the third round. the strategy that we're employing this year, mostly recommending, is taking 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds and then grabbing a receiver or 2 in rounds 3 through 5. And DJ Moore will typically be there for you in the 3rd round, depending on your league settings. But if you're drafting near the turn and all the running backs are gone in the 2nd round, might be worth jumping up and grabbing DJ Moore in the 2nd, just to make sure you get him. We have DJ Moore ranked very high. You can see where we have him ranked. You can click on the link in the description, go to our website, see where everyone's ranked. But DJ Moore is our number 6 wide receiver. So once Chris Godwin is gone, DJ Moore is the next guy up for us. And I think he's going to end up being this year's Chris Godwin, someone that sees a massive boost in his value. This is a team that doesn't really have a defense, and playing in a conference or a division that they're going to be in a lot of shootouts. DJ Moore is going to be heavily involved again. If he stays healthy, plays 16 games, don't be surprised if he's in contention for that top 3 wide receiver spot. So absolutely love DJ Moore this year. And let's get to our next one. So this one is a little bit hard to buy into, just because I know there's a lot of emotion going into where Odell Beckham has left fantasy owners in the past couple years. And I just want to reiterate how much this has to do with injury. And yes, that is a downside still, because Odell Beckham has not been healthy for a good few years. But when healthy, Odell Beckham has been arguably the best receiver in terms of efficiency and just straight up dominance for fantasy football purposes and just on the field. Last year was not a good year for Odell Beckham. He injured his core muscles in offseason, and he was on the injury report for the entire year. Came out and basically said it was limiting him pretty severely. It also prevented him and Baker Mayfield from being able to get onto the same page. Last year, the Browns' offensive line was bad. Freddie Kitchens' offensive play calling was absolutely terrible. I mean, there were a lot of negatives going against Odell Beckham, and we can, it's easy to just throw it all away and say it's still Odell Beckham, but that's probably the best approach when you're dealing with a guy that is ridiculously athletic. He's playing on a team with a completely different offensive line, completely revamped. Baker Mayfield should have a lot more time to have to throw the ball. He's not going to have to win the game as much anymore. This team is focused on getting that run game going, so Baker Mayfield will be able to take his time and also hopefully be able to hit Odell Beckham on some of the deep targets. Last year, OBJ he was number 2 in the amount of deep targets, just didn't turn into much. 133 targets in total. That was number 12 at the receiver position. So if Odell Beckham and Baker Mayfield are able to get on the same page a little bit more, they establish that run game a bit more, even if it lowers the pass volume. Jarvis Landry is recovering from a hip injury that at this point, we still don't even know that Jarvis Landry is going to be on the field week 1. And even if he is, no guarantees anywhere close to full health. So OBJ is a massive value in the 3rd round, has the potential to be the wide receiver 1 overall. And anytime you can get a receiver in the 3rd round that has the potential to do that, you pair Odell Beckham with 2 running backs in your first 2 picks. Man, I get it. I know, I understand that it's sometimes hard to go back to the well on a guy like Odell Beckham, but overall, absolutely love Odell Beckham in the 3rd round, and I think he's going to make a lot of fantasy owners regretful if they're punching him. All right, let's jump over to our next pick. Now, this one also, and you might start sensing a pattern with the type of receivers that we typically call out for my guys. I really like receivers that are really good at running routes, really good at creating yards after the catch, and overall are heavily involved with their teams. That has been the case for our process for a while. That was why we liked Devontae Adams and Juju Smith-Schuster. It's why we liked Keenan Allen, Julian Edelman, and Tyler Lockett last year, and should go right back to the well and say Robert Woods is a massive value this year, still not getting the respect he deserves going in round 4. Last year, he finished with 140 targets. That was number 8 at the receiver position. He was second in yards after the catch with 560 and number 11 in true catch rate. He did same thing with DJ Moore. Saw a very low touchdown count, but that historically is lower than where he is typically. Brandon Cooks is gone. They didn't bring any receiver in of note to replace him, and Todd Gurley is gone as well. So there's plenty of targets to go around. As this team shifted to more 12 personnel, we saw Robert Woods' fantasy value explode. Over the back half of the season, he was an elite wide receiver 1, finishing in the top 5 over the back half of that season. So I know splits aren't necessarily the best way to look at things, but as this team developed, it's easy to see the trend that they're going to go to, especially with Brandon Cooks no longer there. Robert Woods has been honestly one of the best values over the past couple years. Ever since Sean McVay took over in Los Angeles, Robert Woods has been a dominant fantasy receiver, and I see no reason why he can't do it again. You grab him as your wide receiver 2 in the 4th round, you will be happy for it. All right, jumping over to our next pick. Dipping in the same well again, we're going back to Tyler Lockett. Now, let me explain a little bit. Tyler Lockett last year, as we had mentioned previously, was in the top 3 in fantasy points scored until he suffered that leg injury late in the season against San Francisco. And from that point forward, he saw his value regress pretty severely. It was a pretty gruesome injury, one that for a while they were actually concerned that he wouldn't be able to play like possibly ever again. I can't remember the exact injury, but I know that it was pretty scary at the time. They had to rush him to the hospital, and came out not as bad as the initial prognosis, but it definitely impacted him for the remainder of the year. And we never really saw again what he had shown us in the first part of the year. So if Lockett ends up coming back full strength, we know that Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett have this strange, unheard of chemistry on field. In 2018, Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson had a perfect passer rating when targeting him, which was an NFL record for the amount of targets Lockett had received. And just the efficiency from Tyler Lockett over the course of his past 200 targets had, in terms of the amount of yards, touchdowns he's scored, he would be outpacing Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams in terms of fantasy points. He just has yet to be able to put together a full season of consistent workload, which I get it. That's part of the reason why he's not going in the first round, but you're also getting him at a discount. So all of the guys that we're targeting here are people that could finish in the top 6 at their position, and each one you get a little bit cheaper. Right now, Lockett's going about the 5th or 6th round. I would take him in the 5th round just to make sure you get him. And we'll get into a little bit more in our players we're avoiding, why we like Lockett more than DK Metcalf this year. But Tyler Lockett is your guy. All right, and then jumping to our last pick. This one is well, you'll know why. So AJ Green, wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. Haven't seen him play since 2018, and I get it. It's hard to go back to the well with these guys that once they get hurt, most people are out on them, and they don't want anything to do with AJ Green because, he's 32, and what does he have left in the tank? Well, for one, the Bengals are telling us that they still think that AJ Green has a lot left to give. Because if they didn't, why else would they give him a franchise tag deal, which it's not cheap? They could have just let him go, and they decided not to do that. And the only reason that they're doing that is because they still believe in AJ Green. All reports in training camp right now say that AJ Green looks like he did in 2018. And last time we saw him in 2018, he was averaging 9 yards per target, 15.1 yards per reception, was on pace for over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. That's a receiver that you would gladly pay a 2nd or 3rd round price tag for. And right now you can get him in the 6th or 7th round. It's a risk, but once you get past the first 5 rounds, taking guys like AJ Green is a no-brainer. Because if AJ Green hits anywhere near where his ceiling is, that's the kind of stuff that sways your entire league. I know you can make a similar argument with like Marquise Brown or Will Fuller going around after him, but AJ Green has shown us before that he can do it. Marquise Brown and Will Fuller are both speculative and both have their own injury concerns in their own right. Whereas AJ Green has had a very consistent track record of scoring over 1,000 yards in multiple seasons with at or around 10 touchdowns. You'll know pretty soon whether or not you had a good thing going with AJ Green, and at least at that point you'll know whether you can continue anymore. But I think people have forgotten how dominant of a fantasy player AJ Green is, which is why he's dropped all the way to the 6th round. So I will take him there pretty much every time. on the hope that he returns to his original form. So those are our my guys for 2020: DJ Moore, Odell Beckham, Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett, and AJ Green. We do also have a few other honorable mentions here. Allen Robinson, a guy we've been pretty high on for a while, absolutely dominant last year, just couldn't quite get to the place where we're going to put him over a guy like DJ Moore. And I think we actually have him ranked right next to Odell Beckham. I just think OBJ gives you a bit more upside, and right now Allen Robinson has a higher ADP. DJ Chark is another guy I really like this year. If Tyler Lockett ends up getting hurt before the season starts, DJ Chark would take over for him in our buy guys. I really like DJ Chark a lot this year. He was absolutely dominant last year. Brandon Cooks, I think, is one of the few receivers that has shown us that he can actually perform well on a new team in the first year. Like him more than Will Fuller. I know he has a concussion history, but Will Fuller has an entire body injury history. So if anyone's going to do it this year, I prefer Brandon Cooks over Will Fuller. Darius Slayton showed us a lot of promise last year. Daniel Jones and him have a pretty rough first quarter schedule. Their first 4 games are brutal, but once the season gets closer to the halfway point, it lightens up a lot. So Darius Slayton could be on a lot of championship winning teams. It's just hard to endorse a player that I don't think is going to get off to a hot start. And Jalen Reagor, same thing. I think it's going to take him a few weeks to truly gain his dominance in that offense, but the Eagles desperately need Jalen Reagor's skill set. Alshon Jeffrey is completely washed and is going to start the season on PUP. Deshaun Jackson hasn't finished the season, and Lord knows when. So Jalen Reagor could become the de facto number 1 pretty quickly in that offense, and I think he's good enough to do it in terms of everything that you measure from a college production standpoint and an athletic profile. He fits the bill of someone that's going to be a massive hit in fantasy and in the NFL. So it might take him a few weeks to get going, but Jalen Reagor is a great late round target, and was definitely in contention for our my guys. Just couldn't quite beat out the other guys that we listed. So that will do it for us for the 2020 my guys for the wide receivers. We got one more video to do. We're going to jump in to do the tight ends. Thank you guys so much for joining us. You can check out our entire rankings by checking out the link in the description, and also hit that subscribe button for more videos like this. Appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.